Welcome back after lunch. This is our final panel for today. Again, for the funded researchers, remember that tomorrow we're doing a special closed workshop. It'll be on the beach in Balboa. The transportation is going to leave at 8:30 from the hotel, and we can talk about that later on. We have this final panel, then we have a lot of time for discussion before we all head off for dinner. But there's been a sort of event in the world that we felt that we needed to take a moment to recognize, and for that, Devine is going to say a few words.
Thank you, Bill. We just learned of the death of Nelson Mandela, and we thought that we should give a moment of silence, or a minute of silence, just to respect his legacy. And I hear that he had visited this campus sometime back. I was just going through the news, and I read that Jacob Zuma announced the death last night, so there's still a lot of activity going on. So perhaps if we could just stand up to give a minute of silence, just in respect of this great man's memory. Thank you. May his soul rest in perfect peace. And thank you, Bill, and thank you, IMTFI, for this.
Well, a giant has passed, but also an inspiration for all of us. And now we have our final panel. And I'm delighted that we were able to get Abhishek Sinha to come all the way from India. He's the co-founder of Echo, which is one of the branchless banking mobile money services that some of our IMTFI researchers have actually done some studies on in the past. And I first met him up at a workshop convening up in Berkeley, where we were thinking about things around sort of infrastructural questions around mobile money, as well as some of the use cases and client uptake issues. So I was thrilled when he accepted our invitation to come and serve as moderator for this final panel, and I'll just turn it over to you, and thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bill, for having me here. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for giving me the last session, because I was just trying to explain to the panelists here, who come from seemingly economics background, and when I was looking at their abstracts and presentations, I came across terms like regression and econometric and spatial. And I did go to Wikipedia. I was able to locate all of these terms, but I couldn't understand. So thank you so much for giving me the last session. Because of my naivety towards these terms, and this is the last session, we got to make it really infuse some energy. I have a special prize for people who ask questions, and the questions are rated on the index of how much trouble you cause to them, and the more trouble you cause, the bigger prize you have. And I'll request you guys to keep to the time limit of 15 minutes. Else I have a few things in my pockets which I'll start throwing. So may I request, who wants to go first? Lakshmi?
Oh, I never knew so much of randomness is there.
We'll let the ladies have the first go.
It's 9. Hello, I'm Lakshmi Kumar, and I'm a professor at IFMR Business School. And this research is based on trying to understand mobile money users as well as agents in 2 states in India and Tamil Nadu. So this is basically the agenda that I will be following. Basically, when I'm trying to give you an introduction to my study, we do understand that in India, in spite of the fact that we know that we are an underdeveloped country, banking access is just 50%, but tele-density has become very high. I have concentrated on looking at migrant workers in India. One of the main reasons is UNESCO, which has been tracking migrant workers in India, has found that about 30% of the population in India has been migrants, and more than 70% of them constitute women. Why? One of the reasons why migrants constitute such a high percentage in India is because of the opportunities that they derive, that they get from the opportunities from urbanization in several parts of India. Now, mobile money instead of bank account or post office, simple reason seems to be very huge accessibility and high penetration, inexpensive and immediate usage of the same, and the last very important thing which the bank requires is the address proof, which is not required for the mobile money. Now, the research questions I address, which I come to directly, is that when these migrants shift from apparent rural areas to the urban areas, it could be like the areas that I looked at in Tamil Nadu, particularly Chennai, as the hub of the migrants, is that when they receive their salaries in cash, would they prefer to have it in cash, or do they translate it into mobile money? And what is the role of the middleman defined in this broad ecosystem? And is there a growing hesitation to keep it in cash? And do they think of mobile cash as a trustworthy system? And can there be a last question, which still is being looked at, is are there other ways of efficiently utilizing the mobile money into a financial inclusion training? Now, I'll quickly run through the literature review, because being very much trained in the academic world, I cannot but look into it without looking at the literature review. So cash in hand versus cash in mobiles, whether it is in Kenya, whether it be in Afghanistan, Morocco, Mongolia, you find that most of the authors discuss usage and the use of mobile money, and secondly, even the role of middlemen. You find that both in Kenya and Afghanistan, there were a lot of dissatisfaction. But later on, both Maas and they found that in 2009, they could design a very useful mobile money service using the M-Pesa model. Can you ensure protection and trust? You find that in the M-Pesa model, there was a lot of satisfaction, but you find in Afghanistan, because of the political setup, there was a lot of mistrust in the mobile system. So when you look at the suggested requisites for the success of the model, one is the utility. The central idea was the use of the mobile phone to the money for the customer. So one thing which we found was it was not very essential that the customer needs to be literate, but he needs to be knowledgeable. And knowledge of the use of the mobile phone, the way it was needed, was what was important. Second was capacity, ability of the providers to make an effective and comprehensive service. So one important idea that most of the service providers were providing was, can I first provide one product which would be successful, and then go on to providing other products? Lastly, an enabling environment, that is a customer trust and establishment of a suitable regulatory framework, which could probably follow later. So the trust was a component we tried very much to look at. The international model which seemed to be in most of the other countries was an MNO-led model, where banks were just present for liquidity, and the agents and the clients followed the MNO. But in India, the mobile money model was very much bank-led. And so the bank either was the one which followed to the MNO and finally the clients. And so the bank-led model was what was present in India. Either the bank directly led it to the clients or through the MNO, which is very, very different from most of the international models. What we did in India was we looked at 250 migrants, and it was a random sample of mobile as well as non-mobile users in rural as well as urban Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. Our the final sample will hope to collect 600 people. What we did was we looked at mobile users and non-mobile users. So non-mobile users were those who remitted money either through the bank, the post office, even through the Hawala system. And an insight into the mobile money user ecosystem as well as the non-mobile ecosystem we got. One huge difference we see here is the average, age looked like almost the same. The number of family members is the same. One huge difference was the monthly income among mobile money users was different, and the amount of money sent among mobile money users was much more different, very different. So what we decided was, what we actually know is that age and number of family members were almost the same, as I said. So we realized that we could hypothesize two important hypotheses. One is average money sent by mobile users significantly higher than non-mobile users? And is emergency money sent by mobile users significantly different from non-mobile users? So our testing model was this. So we tried to have two hypotheses. One was regarding the mobile money users sending more money as compared to non-mobile users. And we controlled for several variables and for region-wise. And what we found among all these, which I will just explain in this so that we don't have to look at the regression results. Mobile money users sent higher average money than non-mobile users, specifically about 14%, and it was significant. We found that with age and education, mobile money users use increases. So what that means is that higher the age of the migrant workers, greater was the use of mobile money. Higher the age of the person, the mobile money use was greater. The usage among men seemed significantly higher as compared to women. And if they came from a different state, we also found the usage was higher. Obviously, remittances were higher when they came from states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Assam, West Bengal, etc. Mobile money users also sent 34% higher emergency money as compared to non-mobile users. And also it increased with age and marital status. So when they were married, they obviously sent more money. And emergency money transfer was higher among interstate users. Most of them whom we interviewed were either truck drivers or construction workers. Some of the discussion of the results we realized were that mobile money users were knowledgeable, and since they earned, when we saw about how much the income they earned, we did realize that they earned about 14,000 rupees as compared to non-mobile users, which was about 6,000 rupees. This is about 2.5 times more. One of the things we realized is they were knowledgeable, and they felt that since they were paid weekly, they felt that they had to keep just enough for themselves and remit the money back home so that their families could get the money. So when on deeper inquiry about why they wouldn't keep the money with themselves, they felt that it was unsafe to keep the money and it would be much better to save it because their bank accounts were at home. Most of them were from different states, and they felt that it would be a saving in their home or it would go to their families in their homes. Also, another thing which we found, there was this sub-ecosystem that their employer had created. Now, what was this? Which, again, I will show you very soon in a video, is that a lot of these people, whether they were drivers or construction workers, used to work for a person, and this person used to remit the money on their behalf through mobile phones to their bank account in the state they lived. And therefore, they never, because they did not have an address proof in Chennai where they lived, so they could, through the mobile phone, remit the money to the bank account in the state they lived. So this was a sub-ecosystem created in Chennai because of their presence working in Chennai. Most of them were sold on this idea of trust because of the immediate receipt via SMS facility and safety. So what would happen is, they have a bank account in a state from where they originated, and they could send the money. It would be 3,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees, and the receipt would arrive to their mobile phone that the amount has been deposited to their bank. And this is something they got in 1 or 2 minutes. And therefore, they never wanted a receipt at all by paper. They were very happy because they could at once call their relative in the state where their relative lived and tell them that the money has been remitted, and they could withdraw the amount that was required. So this was a trust that was created immediately. And this is one of the reasons why they trusted the system. So this is one of the reasons why this one product, namely remittance, has caused so much trust among the migrant workers. And where would they get this trust from is to the person whom they went to charge their mobile phones. Now, a possible ecosystem which I thought we could develop, therefore, that could develop over a period of time for these 30% of migrant workers, 300 million people in India, is create in India, the RBI or the central bank thinks in terms of creating an account. You could create an account for a family, a person, whether they are in any part of India. Once you create an account, it could be MNO agnostic, it could be bank agnostic. And then the most important thing is activation of the account so that the family, whether the family is in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, anywhere, could get government transfers, either pension, it could be any government transfer because of the fact that they could be in some class of people. After that comes domestic remittances, because some person in the family actually goes away as a migrant and they could remit money. The most important thing about domestic remittances is you're thinking in terms of this particular agent is thinking of more customers and not so that you can get more and more business. And the last and most important thing is in terms of getting into the mobile wallet. And that is finally getting into merchant acceptance. Start from remittance and go on to more products. I'd like to show you a small film that we did so that it would make it more clear. Just get that going.
In India, migration accounts for nearly 30% of the population. In India, migration accounts for nearly 30% of the population. These migrants are excluded from society and are treated as second-class citizens. Chennai, the focus of our study, is the 4th largest metro in India with a population of about 5 million. Migrants to Chennai is vast due to opportunities as well as urbanization. Since early 2012, mobile money has made inroads, particularly to the lives of these migrant workers.
Because a lot of customers here come is North Indian. 80% customers are totally North Indian customers. And many times they come across for me asking for bank details.
பார்த்தீங்கன்னா இந்த ஏரியாலேயே நிறைய ஹிந்தி கஸ்டமர்ஸ் தான் ஜாஸ்தி. ஸோ அவங்க வந்து இப்போ வெளியே போய் பேங்க்கில் போகிறதுன்றது வந்து அவங்களுக்கு ரொம்ப இம்பாசிபிள். ஆக்சுவலி அவங்க வந்து பார்த்தீங்கன்னா நிறைய வந்து கேட்குறதே வந்து எனக்கு உடனே போகணும்.
जैसे SBI में हम पैसा नहीं डिपॉजिट कर सकते, हमें ग्रीन कार्ड नहीं है, मैं यहाँ का नहीं हूँ, तो मेरा यहाँ भी लोकल अकाउंट नहीं है.
तो पहले बैंक में जाते थे मगर बैंक में भी पैसा नहीं ले रहा है. बोलता है कि 10,000 से नीचे रहेंगे तो पैसा नहीं लेंगे, 10,000 से ऊपर रहेंगे तो पैसा.
To these people, we ask why mobile money?
Anytime, anywhere, time saving.
ஆக்சுவலி அது இல்லாமல் பெஸ்ட் என்னன்னா அவங்களுக்கு SMS வர்றது தான். அவங்களுக்கு வந்து இப்போ பார்த்தோன்னே உடனே பார்த்துக்கிறாங்க. உடனே SMS வந்துச்சு, பெனிஃபிட் ஆடட் SMS வந்துச்சுன்னொடனே அடுத்த நிமிஷமே அவங்க வந்து ஒன்றுமே ஒரு வார்த்தை கூட பேசுறது கிடையாது.
इजीली हो जाता है, मोबाइल में मैसेज आता है कि वहाँ डिलीवर हो गया.
My family friend number.
अगर मैं कोई रिलेटिव के पास पैसा भेजना चाहता हूँ तो इजीली भेज सकता हूँ यहाँ से.
Till today, from the date I started till today, it's only mouth to mouth campaign. I'm not gone across, given pamphlets, distributed, ऐसा कुछ नहीं किया. तो जो भी कस्टमर आते हैं सिर्फ उन्हीं को बोलते हैं.
जब मैं यहाँ आया तो इन्होंने बताया कि मुझे एक पेपर दिया था मोबाइल लेने का जो
கார்டு ரொம்ப சொன்னாங்க ஃபர்ஸ்ட் இங்கே தான் தெரியும் இன்ஃபர்மேஷன்.
We realize that the market strategy seems to be one of pull and not push. This leads us to the question of mobile money's growth and revenue model.
विदिन अ मंथ थोड़ा सा बढ़ गया.
उससे क्या होगा, मतलब जैसे शुरुआत किया आज देखे तो अराउंड 200% ग्रोथ.
நிறைய நான் நிஜமாக சொல்லணும்னா ஓகே ஃபைன் ஓகே டபுள் ஓகே.
Not only this money transfer and other things, through that I am trying to get new customers.
We then ask, what are the prospective gains in mobile money?
கஸ்டமர்ஸ் நிறையா இருந்தால் தான் நமக்கு ப்ராஃபிட் இருக்கிற மாதிரி தெரியும். ஒரே கஸ்டமர்ஸ் ஒரு 2 times மேலே அவங்க போட மாட்டாங்க, ஏன்னா மந்த்லி தான் அவங்க इनकम தான்.
महीने महीने हम लोग भेजते हैं, परमानेंट महीने में.
कस्टमर बढ़ने से ही तो अच्छा रहेगा. 1 से 4 होगा तभी तो
2 मरता 1 मरता होता है, 1 या 2 बार.
But this is not all. Mobile money has created a sub-ecosystem.
और 4 times அவருக்கு இல்லை மேடம், என்கிட்ட ஒரு 5-6 பேர் இருக்காங்க. யாராருக்கெல்லாம் தேவைப்படுதோ என் அக்கௌண்ட்டில் போட்டுருக்காங்களோ அவங்க ட்ரான்ஸ்ஃபர் பண்ணி விட்டோம்.
டிரைவர்ஸ் அமௌண்ட்ஸ் எல்லாம் நிறைய நம்மகிட்ட வரும். ஆள் பேங்க்குக்கு போகிறதுக்கு ஆள் இல்லை.
ஏன்னா உடனே குயிக்காக உங்களுக்கு ட்ரான்ஸ்ஃபர் ஆகுது, உடனே இங்கே போட்டு அடுத்த செகண்ட் அங்கே டெலிவரி பண்ணி எடுத்துக்கலாம்.
ब्रोकर लारी का है, ये भेजने के लिए हमारे को पैसा नहीं है.
மேடம் நான் எதுவும் கமிஷன் என்ன பணம் போட சொல்கிறாங்களோ அதை போட்டுருவோம்.
Benefit of mobile money is apparent, both to the agent and the customer. For the agent, it's one more business line. For the customer, a safe mode of money transfer. However, the greatest advantage of mobile money is its ability to deliver money with speed and ease. It has also created trust and safety with the poor migrants. In conclusion, we can say the mobile money has created sub-ecosystems of money transfer among employers, and this hopefully will translate into financial inclusion, as remittance is the beginning of saving.
Thank you.
I was asking KV and Cyril, how did they get together? Because I kept wondering how a Indian and a French from academics got together. They did try to give me a few answers, but I wasn't convinced how they got together.
Hello everybody. Thanks to IMTFI to organize this conference, to Bill, Jenny, everybody. Okay, it's okay, maybe like this. Just to start, we are in California, and before to come here, some of my friends told me, okay, you have to buy a new jacket. You know, you are going to US for the first time of your life. You have to take care about yourself, to cut your hair, to make technology, etc. You are in California. So I didn't cut my hair because it's a winter. I don't want to get cold, and I love the jacket. But we used to try to make an effort in terms of technology and to use a presentation. So I hope that it will be nice. It's the first time that we are going to do it. And so our presentation is speaking about space and financial inclusion. And we are going to present our research project, basically. So now it's working. For two years, we have a kind of spatial representation of the financial inclusion at the world level. But we have to be careful with the spatial element, since, in fact, we have the feeling that with this kind of map, we cannot see the reality. It's a translation, in fact. And if you have a look to another map, like this one, this anamorphic map, you can see that financial exclusion is not where we believe that it is with the other map. So it was just an introduction to show you why we are working in India also, because it's a place where financial exclusion is maybe not the most important in terms of ratio, but in terms of population in the world, in Asia in general, with China. It can explain why so much scholars work in financial inclusion in India. So here it's our research project, and we are we are trying to understand these middlemen, these people that make intermediaries between bank and clients, this business correspondent. It's a new model that appeared a few years ago in India, and mainly our research project tried to understand the complementarity between banking system, business correspondent, and clients in mobile banking. So our project also starts with previous work that we have done in Kenya. I had the chance to work with Susan Johnson, and based on several surveys, national one and a lot of field works, we have been able to create plenty of spatial representation of the spread of financial inclusion in Kenya. And what it is interesting is it's okay, not this one, that we have been able to make a spatial interpolation through a national survey to represent financial services, but all the kind of financial services, formal one, informal one. I think it's the first time that we have been able to represent the spatial representation of informal sector at one national level. Because here you have the ROSCA system, but we have done it for banking system, for the banking sector, for the SACO one, MFI, M-Pesa, ROSCA, HASCA, and it's quite useful. And then, in fact, Susan did a lot of field work there, and we have been able to work in different places, in Karatina, other places like this, to have more deep interview and to illustrate, in fact, spatial elements at different scales, not only at the national level, but also to try to understand the spatial mobility of the clients according to their use, their income, the different kind of services, etc., etc. And we have even been able to represent, in fact, kind of a social. Here you have in blue the man, in red woman, and we can see that when people use M-Pesa, MFI, bank, or SACO, that it is in the middle, they have also other kind of financial services. This means that before to use M-Pesa or before to use microfinance sector, you have first to be included in the informal sector, like ASCA, ROSCA, welfare group, even to have a secret place to have your money. And to represent this result in this way is quite useful because in 5 minutes we have the result and you can show it quite quickly. So here we had some interesting results to speak about M-Pesa, to understand the spread of M-Pesa in comparison with the informal sector, but and to try to have some elements about the financial landscape in Kenya. And of course, we can ask this question: it is the same in India or not? Do the spatial complementarity can be same with the financial services that operate in India? It was our question. And mainly, we are going to try to understand the complementarity connection between the specialty of banking supply and business correspondent in India. And if business correspondents spread in the pocket where financial exclusion is very high, in fact, it's the main question. If we have a macroeconomics point of view, if we want to think at the national level in terms of policy, we have to see where is the pocket of financial exclusion and to see if these programs are going these places. And the best way to do it is to make some maps and a special approach. So I'm going to let...
Thanks, Cyril. So as Cyril was mentioning, this is our objective. This is the background with which we got into this project. Understanding the spatial complementarity of various partners, various players within this banking correspondent system, and also how is it going to affect the financial inclusion in India? How is it in making sure that it brings about financial inclusion in India? Now, what are we trying to ascertain here? We are looking at the existing situation of financial inclusion in India. And it's still a work in progress. So we have just finished our pilot data collection on November 2nd. We just went on the field and we were able to establish a relationship with the banking correspondents, the lead bankers, the nodal agencies, and also a couple of microfinance institutions and NGOs. That will give us a head start into the main data collection, final data collection, subsequent to this that we are going to be looking at. Once we get into this, we would be looking at producing maps. For that, primary objective is producing maps. That will be supported by indicators on financial inclusion and banking correspondence, both at the district level for the entire nation, and then getting into the district level and also the block level, district level information for two specific states, which is Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. Reasons for choosing these two areas: Cyril has worked in Andhra Pradesh a couple of years back, and I am based out of Tamil Nadu. He has also done work in Tamil Nadu. So using our networks, using our contacts, we will be able to get more detailed level data in these two states. That's the objective that we have. Then also understand how the financial inclusion dynamics operate in terms of spatial econometric analysis, and also what are the determinants which would be responsible for that spatial differences. The factors that we would be looking at would be caste, age, sex, education, religion, etc. How is it going to be affecting the financial inclusion metrics in those regions? Having done that, we'll also be looking at the legal and regulatory environment, which we have also looked at initially. The preliminary understanding says that there are a couple of reasons why the Central Bank of India started off with this or launched this banking correspondence model. We'll be exploring that in detail. Then also what led to the formation of banking correspondence. It could be the lead bankers system which is there at the district level. Then we've had discussions with a couple of them in Tamil Nadu. Then the service providers who provide the technical assistance and also the technical support for the banking correspondence system. Then how would the rural level entrepreneurs in the form of banking correspondents pan out the service? How are they chosen? How are they operating? These are the issues that we have kind of started off with a pilot study, and we are able to finalize and concretize the questionnaire that we are going to be deploying. And also the state level coordinating agencies is the one which is going to be monitoring, supervising, and also implementing these issues, implementing the challenges and objectives as prescribed by the Reserve Bank, that's the Central Bank of India, and its implementation at the ground level. So those are the issues that we are exploring. One thing that we found was at the policy level, the implementation has been quite unique. It's not mandatory. It's not optional. In a sense, the Central Bank of India has identified, okay, you are going to be the nodal agency for a particular region. You're going to be implementing it, and no other partner would be entering that domain. So it's kind of a compulsory model or a mandatory model, and that kind of ensures the volume. It kind of ensures the results are being executed. It also ensures that people are not getting into unnecessary competition, which was kind of a flaw in the microfinance industry, which led to the crisis there. And at the ground level, we also are looking at the operators. What are the challenges that these operators are playing, and how are they facing these challenges? How are they overcoming these challenges at the ground level? Now, having come out with these two models, two fundamental issues, we would be looking at a third level of issue, which is going to be operationalizing the business correspondents in India. How are they looking at, how are they using the help of mobile banking? What we found was during the preliminary study, most of them are being provided with equipments which are small electronic gadgets, and these are provided by the technical support agency or the banks themselves. And this is kind of operating in that mobile banking space, not exactly mobile banking, but also mobile equipments are being used for implementing this business correspondence model. The reason was it's not just transferring money and receiving money. It also provides other kind of additional services which are going to be used at the ground level. So we're going to be looking at how it would be used as part of the business correspondence model. Then one thing that we're also looking at is how is it helping the rural entrepreneurs. We found that many of them are not carrying business correspondent activity as a sole activity. They are running shops, they're running some other business activity, and as an additional source of income, they are taking up this responsibility. Whether this is a good model, whether this is not a good model, is something that we need to go to the field and find out, which we'll be doing soon. Then also in terms of investments, many of them are just completed their high school. Many of them are graduates, unemployed people. They're not even graduates, so how would that work out is something that we need to be exploring in terms of investments and operations. How are they going to be raising funds? And what we found was a typical business correspondent is required to make an investment of anywhere between 5,000 to about 15,000 rupees. Whether that's an amount which they can afford, whether that's an amount which is worth investing. If they're not able to earn that kind of revenue that is being promised, how would they? What would happen to their investments? How would they operate? How would they integrate other businesses? Something that we are going to be exploring. How would technology be useful in operationalizing business correspondence? We saw that the equipments are small and remote. Two different kinds of models are available, but depending on the kind of bank which is operating in a particular space. It could be a simple mobile, it could be an equipment, standalone equipment, or it could be a combination of these two. We are also looking at what kind of alternatives are being used in this Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh region. And then again, how is it finally impacting on the financial inclusion, the fundamental objective that we have. So these are the things that we are looking at. Then we'll also be looking at this is about operationalizing. I'll let Cyril continue again. I'll take back. Yeah.
So it is more or less the main objective of our research project, and now what we have done and what we are going to do. And we have done some element about the financial inclusion landscape in India, and to do it we have built, in fact we have updated previous index of financial inclusion at the district level that we have done for the first time a few years ago. So we have been able to update it with the new data, etc. Following a general methodology, multidimensional financial inclusion index, taking care about banking penetration, the use of banking system, and the availability. So with some calculation, basic one, we have been able to build an index of financial inclusion that we have been able also to represent, to map, in fact, at the district level. And we can do it for several years, since more or less the beginning of the 90s until more or less now, 2011, the last one. So more than just represent financial inclusion, we can also test some policies that has been applied in India at the national level. For example, the effect of financial liberalization in the 90s, all these kind of elements. So it's quite useful, in fact, because can be also, this spatial econometrics can be a tools for social scientists to bring some insight from the anthropologist field to prove to the pure economist that sometimes liberalization has not been so good in terms of access to banking services, etc., etc. So we have done it at the district level, but we started to do it also at the mandal level, block level, if you want. It depends on the region where you are. In Andhra Pradesh, for example, you have a small map done, but I'm not sure that you are able to see it, because we try to take care about this line. Because in fact, here you cannot see it. And up, you are able to have a look to it. So special place in Mahbubnagar, close to Hyderabad, etc., etc. So we have done a lot of work in this side, and then we began to analyze it and to try to make some spatial econometrics to speak with a pure economist and to have some strong proof to be able to discuss with them, in fact. Because sometimes some economists cannot understand other things that numbers, so we are obliged to deal with numbers also. So we have done it with some spatial econometrics, so I'm not going to enter in the details, but we can prove that, in fact, we test some hypotheses in some econometrics way to say that, in the place where scheduled tribes are the most important in India, in the place where the proportion of scheduled castes are the most important at the district level in India, the place where the female literacy is lower in India, it's a place also where financial inclusion is lower. And we are also in the way to test some effect of the financial liberalization from the 90s, etc., etc. So it is a work in process, and now I think it's
okay. The timelines that we will be looking at in implementing these projects are there. Yeah, next one. Yeah. As I said, we just finished our pilot interviews in October. We started it in the end of October, and we finalized it or finished it in the first week of November. We are also looking at during that time, what we did was we approached various levels of agencies. One was at the lead banker, we looked at the branch level, we looked at the bank level, and then we also went into the NGOs, we went into the banking correspondence level. We interviewed many agencies in this ecosystem. Then we were able to build up relationships, and we were also able to test our questionnaires. That's kind of done in October 2013. After that, we'll be next implementing the final questionnaire. We'll be modifying it, and we'll be implementing it on the field, after which we'll be conducting in-depth interviews. We are hopeful of completing it in the last week of March 2014, and after that we'll be running the regressions, modeling, mapping, everything would be done by May 2014. So this is what we'll be looking at. Next. This, the broad interviews that we have, we are not finalized on the number of samples that we have. We are going to be interviewing, and we are going to be collecting data from. The reason is each state, each district, each block, each taluk is having a different kind of numbers. We're not able to identify how much is going to be what, how much is going to be where, depending on the level of difficulty that we will be facing. we'll identify a suitable number of sample, and then we'll be deploying it. So what we thought was, based on all these things, it would be better if we could represent it in the spatial dimension. And then this spatial dimension is not just going to be pixelated or graph-oriented data. It's going to be a lot of research-based, a lot of regression-based, a lot of model-based data, which we are going to be stating as is situation. So finally, to conclude, what we look at is money is a very highly political subject. It's a highly political commodity also. A lot of people bring in a lot of feelings into this. And in this conference over the last 2 days, we saw that various dimensions of money has been discussed, which could be social, which could be econometric, economic, political, financial, even anthropological, historical. All those dimensions have been brought about. As how I put it, money is capable of creating social spaces and built environments. So we thought, why not bring in the geographic and spatial dimension to it? And this is what we're going to be looking at in our project. Once again, thank IMTFI, Bill and Jenny for all their support in this research. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was indeed the technologically best presentation I have seen, and probably a very good investment pitch to Jake. You will for sure get your funding. So we now have Amrit. Yesterday, Bill mentioned about mechanical engineer. This guy is a chemical engineer trying to decipher the chemistry between banks, the regulators, and MNOs.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, let me thank IMTFI, Bill, Jenny, and team for bringing together an incredibly eclectic group of researchers. We have heard economists, anthropologists, business students, design thinkers, and industry practitioners talk about money as an idea, and always keep questioning the fundamentals of what we think about money. I represent the startup facet of this community with a full-time engagement at Kopo, a startup in Kenya, but my research is based in India. And it is unusually brilliant for academia to embrace simultaneously the two extremes, the deep detail of research and the agile abstraction of startups. So thank you so much, IMTFI. Okay. So let's go to India and see why it remains such a great opportunity for payment systems in terms of sheer size and complexity that needs to be addressed. So the underlying thesis of why remittances in India are so big is the increasingly skewed trajectory of development. According to Census of India 2011 and the geospatial surveys, top 10 cities in India account for 8% of the population, produce 15% of the economic output, with only 0.1% of the total land area. So if India was this room full of 1,000 chairs, you'll have 80 people sitting on one chair and producing the 15% of the economic or the intellectual output, and that seems to be very difficult. So let's talk about the areas of the research and where is this focused. To an extent, remittance patterns go hand in hand with migration patterns, and we have explored the patterns of migration in detail in this conference. As a result, remittance corridors in India can be treated as so-called hot zones with a tremendous amount of money that flows in between two aspirational extremes, the village and the city. The true remittance corridors that we are looking at here are between Mumbai and Bihar. Mumbai is on the west, just south of the left arm to yours. Bihar is the state on the east. Oh, sorry. Can't seem to get it back. Oh, yeah, so Bihar is this, Mumbai is this. A lot of migration happens here. The second corridor is Delhi and UP, Uttar Pradesh. To give you a picture of what Bihar looks like, if Bihar were a country in Africa, it would be the second most populous and the second lowest GDP in a country itself. And Mumbai, of course, is the financial capital of India, Delhi the political, and the second financial capital of India. So the differential of money and the income levels is tremendous. To give you a picture of what our subjects look like, most of our subjects were based in the migrant catchments in and around Delhi, so not the downtown, but the satellite towns. So one of our premier research areas was a sub-town called Bhiwandi in Mumbai, an hour's drive. Most of these workers are unskilled labor, or rickshaw drivers, household help, or they operate traditional industries such as manual handlooms, just to give you a picture. The study only tracks the sending party, so we cannot possibly trace the payment at the receiver's end, because the sending party is the more empowered user here, because he makes the economic decision of sending the money. He has a choice of which partner or which channel the money goes through, and that we'll explore that relationship later in the presentation as well. So here's what. If there's anything such as remittance pornography, it's in Bhiwandi. It's just an hour's drive from Mumbai. You can see every second shop on the street has a remittance outlet, and every shop has several remittance providers. This is one of shops. It's a small airtime outlet, sells shampoo, from shampoo to FMCG products to remittance to mobile recharges. Very well branded. Everything is immersed in Echo's branding. You can see there's hair oil products inside, there's batteries, there's a lip balm somewhere, and the remittance product really sits in the life of a consumer's daily visit. This is a hardware store in a suburb in Gurgaon. Funnily enough, this hardware store is right next to the Royal Bank of Scotland in Gurgaon. It's a 100-story building. It's 80-story building right next to the shop. Again, hardware workers who work in construction industry in and around Gurgaon use this shop as an outlet to send money back home. This is Bollywood coming together with remittances. So a signal there is that if a company has enough expenditure in marketing to spend on Bollywood, the sector has arrived on the national scene. And here's a famous movie. It's in fact the highest grossing Bollywood movie ever, Chennai Express, starring Shah Rukh Khan, which some of you might know, promoting Western Union money transfer in a suburb in Mumbai, which is fascinating to me. And since Bhiwandi happens to be a largely Muslim-dominated society, you see that there's this ad is contextual to the festival of Eid, when the remittances see a big peak. This is a referral slip that Echo agents use to refer their friends and kind of get them signed up and tell them about Echo, and they get an incentive for that. So let's take a step back and again see how an outlet in Bhiwandi or Gurgaon looks like. Every single intervention that we have heard about, a kiosk, an internet bank, a cell phone, or a bank branch itself, is available in that small catchment. Parul and Amulya have talked about kiosks extensively yesterday. Expectedly, most of the payments and most of the remittances in this corridor are unidirectional from Mumbai to Bihar and from Delhi to UP. Traditionally, a lot of these transactions used to flow through Hawala, but with government promoting financial inclusion, and most importantly, the market being competitive to Hawala's rates, with added security, the Hawala market is gradually facing more competition, and we see a very significant shift from informal Hawala channels to more formal bank-led channels, which include mobile and kiosk and internet banking and all that. So round one of the research, as I call it, the known unknown. So we at least know the questions that we want answers to. And that's kind of the starting point. So let's explore those answers. I don't want to dive too much into detail, but methodology was just around interviewing customers. So the questions that we sought out to find answers to banked versus unbanked. Most users of the product already own a bank account. It might be a no-frills account or a full-fledged account. Almost 100%, in fact, mandated by the regulation, 100% of all receivers need to have a bank account, even though the sender does not have a bank account. The bank branch is the primary cash out point. So our hypothesis there was that obviously you're sending money through XYZ channels, but what's the form factor of withdrawing the money? And it's predominantly the bank branch and not the ATM or any other banking correspondent. The short e-money loop, the e-money loop is, almost all of us would be familiar with that term, but it's the time length of the money stays in the system. And this is very typical of even in M-Pesa in Kenya, where the typical transaction is you cash in, you immediately send money to your mother in the countryside, and she immediately withdraws it. It's very true with this remittance system as well. Most transfers are immediately withdrawn at the bank branch. Urgent versus periodic remittances, this is very cyclical, where you have periodic expenditures like salary and school fees being sent to their native towns, which is about 65%, and urgent one-off incidental expenditures like health emergencies or somebody dying consist the rest. So all of this starts to sound very warm and fizzy, and the age of perfect competition, a vibrant ecosystem with diverse products and hopefully good revenue, but there's more nuance to it. It is at this juncture we move to the unknown unknowns, the conjectures. We don't know what answers to. And it's a state of serendipity that leads to findings that are perhaps more important than the original thesis itself. So now within what appears to be a very vibrant ecosystem, there are gaping systemic faults. Most research in this domain has majorly focused on comparative landscapes between informal and formal, but what we haven't focused is within the ambit of these bank-enabled transactions, we haven't explored if these channels are competing against each other or can they actually coexist in the system. And these form factors can be USSD feature phones, it can be a GPRS or Bluetooth-enabled phones, it can be a laptop sitting in a shop, or it can be the bank branch itself. It is yet to be investigated among these channels which one will satisfy the need at scale and will become the most preferred conduit for delivery of financial services. In a system where there's no clear mandate from regulators and key stakeholders like banks, we run the risk of diminishing the uniqueness of these channels and not paying enough attention to pushing one channel or even testing out which channel works. So there are 4 or 5 features that we never sought to pursue, but they're kind of a spin-off from this research. And the first is hyper-commoditization and competition. You will immediately feel, as soon as you walk into any of these catchment areas, that a remittance product in India is essentially like buying detergent. You pick the cheapest one that works. There's hardly any differentiation apart from a logo here or a font there or a marketing budget differentiation. Unlike detergent, though, remittances are not scalable with the baggage that comes with regulation that has traditionally been very exuberant in India. Exuberant is a kind word. Commoditization in itself isn't such a bad thing. In fact, it signals ubiquity in the market. You don't think about buying detergent, or you don't think about, say, buying Amazon Web Services. Storage space got cheap, and now it's commoditized, and it's reached scale. However, in the case of the remittance market in India, commoditization has happened before scale. So the size of the pie hasn't grown. It's just that more people are trying to take little slices of the pie. So essentially, the market is become a very zero-sum game where most remittance providers are trying to outdo each other by providing 1 rupee here and there in commissions to the agent. And the question that begs to be asked that who will survive in this rather unsustainable last man standing game. In the second part, the least cost routing, it's very apparent that agents are using malpractices to create the best environment for themselves. So promoting the remittance product at the point of remittance, or as the technical terminology goes, the CSP, the customer service point, you need a champion at the point of sale. And the champion is the agent. And since one's agent often serves several competing products, often the money is hoarded, quote unquote, for a few minutes. What that means that even though the customer might request to send money via, say, Echo, the agent might use a different channel that gives him more commission and by extension, cheating the customer. In a lot of cases, bank agents will assimilate money at the end of the day and simply visit the local bank branch, which is cheaper for them, but they still end up getting the commission from the customers because they told their customer this money is going via Echo. The ecosystem by extension then becomes a cannibalistic one where several channels are starting to compete with each other and kind of kill each other at the same time, and nobody is actually reaching some sort of scale. At last count, India's largest private bank had 4 mobile money products that basically do the same thing, and nobody knows why they exist. All of them have been promoted sporadically with little oversight to add up to the bigger vision. The result, that no product reaches significant scale and no lessons are learned for more oversight. Even the brand loyalty part now. And this is where we take a step back and think about the receiver and sender relationship. There is no way for the receiver to identify where the transaction came from. It came from the sender, but whether it came from a bank branch, whether it came through a cell phone, whether it came through a USSD transactions, there is no differentiation at the receiver's end. So there's no incentive for remittance players to invest in brand building or a loyalty of sorts where you have faith in the brand. So most of the faith and loyalty exist at the sender's part, not at the receiver's part. So the social network and the virality effect all diminishes very quickly. And this sort of the lack of a clear understanding of which channel works and the attempts to understand which channel should we invest in has also led to the erosion of technology in a way. We don't know which technology will scale. There's kiosks, there's internet banking, 3G and broadband are slowly penetrating India. So it's not clear if mobile money will lead the way or follow the way, or everyone will just coexist in a system. The last and perhaps the most important part is the sustainability of the market. And because of such a zero-sum game where the only winner in the long term is the agent and not the remittance provider themselves because they're spending money giving commissions to them, and eventually not even the customer. And a great lesson lies in the telecom market in India. India has obviously been the golden goose for the last 7 to 8 years in the telecom sector, where each telecom circle in India had 10 to 15 operators with billions of dollars in investment from Vodafone and Airtel and operators Telenor. So what happened that hyper competition pushed prices down and the consumer benefited in the short term. India has hands down the cheapest call rates in the world. It's a per second tariff. You used to get great vouchers for international calls. But what that hyper competition did is kill a lot of companies. And now when the companies that couldn't make any money and couldn't sustain themselves are gone, the incumbent operators are actually raising prices. So the customer is actually suffering in the long run. And perhaps nobody won in that zero-sum last man standing battle. A very similar scenario is emerging in remittances as well, and perhaps it's time for the regulators to look at history, look at the lack of decisiveness on their part, look at attempts to differentiate channels and take steps going forward, and not do sweeping, judgmental, and big brother sort of decisions. So around this, I do realize that the unknown unknowns are more extensive than the known unknowns. But this is kind of the spin-off that has come out of this research, and I'll conclude by saying that. There's a couple of pictures. You can see one outlet with several operators. It's beautiful. The translation for this is भारत के सभी बैंकों में कहीं भी कभी भी पैसे भेजने की ऑनलाइन सुविधा यहाँ उपलब्ध है. Any bank in India can receive money via an online transfer. It's available here. That's it.
Thank you, Amrit, for such a real picture of what's for the questions. Well, while people are thinking about questions, I have a question for Lakshmi. Have you ever used middlemen for doing any financial transaction?
For me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've used middlemen for mutual funds.
And what was the purpose of middlemen?
The purpose was, well, at that point of time, I didn't have this ICICI Bank account. Right now I do, so I look at it and I purchase and sell all my, I look at it and so I'm able to do everything. So earlier, since I didn't have the account, I used middlemen. So they used to come and try and sell the products that they thought was right and wrong. And I think they tried to sell products that were, for which they got higher commission.
Sure.
I mean, I realized that very quickly, being a professor of economics.
Well, assistance is
I think that's why you were asking me this question.
The point which I was trying to draw everyone to is that assistance is a big phenomenon in India. And it's not that even when self-service options are available, do people exercise it? And people will always opt for assistance. It's a very behavioral thing. You know, we are quite a set of lazy guys in the country. And without assistance, it's a bit tough for us. Sure. Questions?
Hi, I'm Ivan Small from IMTFI. Lakshmi, I wanted to ask you about the remittance ecosystems you were talking about. You said you kind of envision this ecosystem that starts with the remittances and that it could lead to merchant payments. And in general, the industry has been very interested in increasing the velocity of payments within a system where there's less need to cash out. But I was wondering, at the end of your presentation, you said remittances are the beginning of savings. But in this kind of ecosystem where remittances are the entry point, but then there's increasing consumption opportunities within this ecosystem, I'm wondering does it always lead to savings, or does it lead to other forms or perhaps increased forms of consumption, which is a different kind of financial inclusion, but not the way that it's often talked about. And then for Amrit, I was interested in your discussion about how these services are targeting the sender, and that there's this kind of, there's all this competition and over very small margins. But I was wondering if you've seen examples of marketing strategies that target the recipient instead. For example, a promotional campaign where the recipient receives some kind of gift if they tell the sender to use a different remittance service, and using that to change behavior.
So to answer your question, the one pattern I saw the people we interviewed among the migrant workers, which was very different from the migrants I saw earlier, was they were living in very large labor camps, very comfortable labor camps actually, and what they did was that they said that they got weekly payments and they would transfer money either to their mother, to their account, or to their wife, and they would say that if it was transferred to my account, it was a saving. And if it was to their family account, it was for consumption. And most of the time, their work was contractual, and they would work in Chennai, and if they left their job, they would have to come back and find the job again. So they had to save money, and they would decide to come back to get another job. So it does create savings. So I specifically asked the question on savings because I'm very interested to understand if income leads to savings at all. So that's a very specific question because savings is a very important part of my research.
Thanks for the question, Ivan. Can you hear me? So far, no, I haven't seen any interventions around promoting stuff at the receiver's end. There have been 1 or 2 attempts at creatively sharing the one-time password so that the receiver can also receive money without having a bank account, but nothing at scale as of today. But it's coming. So the RBI has something called the semi-closed wallet, in which money can be, it can be topped up, but it cannot be withdrawn. And they're trying to change that to an open wallet. Weird concept. There's no such thing as a semi-closed wallet in real life. But when it becomes an open wallet, then it starts becoming a network where the entity, if you are, say, if you have an Airtel Money wallet which is open, you put money on it and then transfer it to another Airtel Money wallet which can be cashed out. So once that the whole loop is completed, perhaps that's when we start to see promotion at both ends rather than just the origination point.
No questions for KB and Cyril?
IMTFI?
They're posted already?
Yeah, no, not yet. But the moment we are going to be completing it, it's going to be there.
So a different question. There's been some work looking at remittance senders' desires to control remittance receivers' behavior. And so some work Dean Young has done with El Salvadoran migrants in the United States and programs, and some show lots of demand to attempt to control the receivers and some no demand to attempt to control the receivers. Any insight into anybody sort of conceiving of marketing some other product to the remittance sender to buy on behalf of the receiver, insurance, schooling, healthcare, something of that nature? And any sense of what the dynamics are in these situations of remittance senders and receivers in terms of how much control the remittance senders would really like, and what are the social arrangements between the two? Are they within households? Are they extended families, et cetera?
So that's definitely that's for you too.
Thank you. Can I answer that question outside the context of India? Okay. So if you travel to the universe of M-Pesa, that's very much happening. It started with airtime transfer, something called Bonga points, where essentially you can, it's loyalty points for recharging using M-Pesa, and you can transfer those loyalty points as much as you can, and then using those loyalty points you can buy an air ticket, you can buy a movie ticket, and stuff around that. So yeah, that's probably one example I can quote. Given there's also some patterns around M-Shwari where they take the challenge of, they take the transaction history on M-Pesa and then kind of use it to assess your credit score, and the sender-receiver relationship there is one signal. So if you're somebody who sends money to more people, your social relevance goes up, and if you receive more money rather than just being a one-to-one. So many-to-one is a highly scored point than a one-to-one relationship. So yeah, I mean the global trend there in payments that transaction fees are disappearing, and we are starting to play more with data and creative uses of data. It'll take some while it comes to mobile money.
But I wanted to say also that if you want some of this map for your website for the Financial Inclusion Initiative, welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mine is a more philosophical, epistemological question. I attended quite a few sessions. You produce this wonderful knowledge, and you come to the United States and give feedback to the groups here about what you're doing and how you have produced this knowledge. I just wanted to ask you, to what extent are you able to shape the policies or contribute to the knowledge within the Indian or whatever African systems so that they benefit from your research? It's a complicated question, but I'm very interested in that. Only because research is funded by many American agencies in apparently very noble causes, that is to help other countries develop their systems and so on and so forth. Number of times I find that the knowledge comes back to the US and it becomes gets embedded within the knowledge system in the US. I was wondering, how are you able to make your research applicable to the Indian scene where you are and influence the policies and so on, rather than merely come back here and report? To me, that seems to be, if that's the case, it's rather unfortunate. And also, I think it's the exploitation by the American funding agencies to get knowledge in one direction. I'm sure Bill won't like my remark, but I just want to make this. In other words, so this is really a very fundamental issue, which I'm also dealing that. Is there some way that you're able to actually improve the conditions within India and contributing to these? So if you're doing so, I would like to hear more about it. If you can't answer the question, that's fine, but this is really something which concerns me. Thank you. Pardon?
Lakshmi is going to take it up, then
I am nobody from the United States.
I'm nobody from the United States.
Well, I don't think, first of all, I must say that I was taken aback as the first speaker, and I did not thank IMTFI for the funding, without which I couldn't have done this research. So let me thank IMTFI, Bill, Jenny, Small, also Smokey, all of you who contributed to my previous research and the present research. To answer your question, I was here in 2010 and I presented a paper on savings. And I must tell you, since you asked about funding from IMTFI and how it has influenced research in India, after I finished my research on savings in India, based on that research, the Central Bank of India, RBI, which has a subsidiary called NABARD. Since you're from India, you must have heard of NABARD. NABARD funded another research project on savings, which I am working on in India once again, based basically on the project that IMTFI gave me. And I'm working on that once again. So I must actually thank IMTFI for giving me the project, because of which I got another project, and therefore I'm working on that project again. So I think it's the recognition of such projects which maybe makes us get some more projects, and therefore it's a ripple effect. So I don't think I have to add more.
Yes, I don't know how many regulators really listen. Yeah, and I think this is a great place for knowledge exchange. I don't think so that any one of our visits is being wasted. Yes, Amulya.
No, just to add further to the statement, to the question that we asked. I come from the public policy background, the legal system and the public policy background. So probably I can add a little bit to what Lakshmi did answer. One is about research diffusion at the ground level within the country. Second one is having access to the people who are looking at the policy level decisions, policy level interventions, and also policy level implementation. So I come from a school called National Law School of India, where many of the financial legislations and other legislations of national importance are being drafted, are being conceptualized, and are being passed on to the parliament for enactment of appropriate legislations. So I was just discussing with my professor there just last week before I started off my journey to the US, and he said, "Oh, that's a brilliant research project that you're going to be doing. Why don't you share the data with us, and then we'll see what can come out of it." So if somebody is interested and somebody is in that connected loop, then it is very easy for them to actually get these data looked into, and also if in case it is required, it can be implemented as a policy within the country. So it is not difficult that policy intervention does not take place. Its only thing is we need to be aware of how to get it done, and also we need to be interested in getting it done. So apart from the mandatory requirements as set by IMTFI, in terms of publication of journal, article and blogs and other things, we also intend to write newspaper articles to publicize what we have been doing in terms of the spatial representations, and also take it to the policy discussion table and see what best comes out of it. So that's what we are intending to do. She has the mic.
Sorry, my question is for KV and Cyril. It's a GIS methodological question. Some of the maps that you presented kind of made sense in the sense that if you're looking at the density of ATMs and so on, ATMs don't move. However, people move, right? So if you're looking at population densities of people who have bank accounts in different places, are these maps based on locations of people at home or where they work? Because these densities are going to change to some extent as people move around on an everyday basis? Or is it a matter of that the scale of the map kind of obscures these individual differences in everyday movement?
Thank you very much for this question. In fact, we have a problem with map because we have the feeling that we can see it quickly, and we have a feeling that we have the real representation in 2 seconds. But it's much more complicated than it. And in fact, for example, with the work that we have done in Kenya, it's a block of 4 maps each time. You have an indicator of quality for the spatial interpolation. This means that according to the place where samples have been conducted, according to different elements of representation, we can say that in this place, the quality of spatial interpolation is good. So you can take into account the spatial interpolation. In other places, for example, the northeast, we had so few samples that, in fact, this spatial interpolation doesn't make sense. So first, you have this map to have in mind. Second one, you have the map with the spatial distribution of the population density. And you can compare it with the result of our spatial interpolation to see if, in fact, the distribution of this, the use of these financial services is in the same place as the population or not. And then you can see if there is some difference or why. At some point you have some difference for the banking system because ethnicity, because you have different ethnic with the West and with a lot of stories that explain why, in fact, the West was not so developed in terms of banking system. And because the ethnic in charge of the central bank was not the one from the West, etc. And we have also different way to represent the same data. It's for this reason that more than all this map, we have different way to represent it. Because according to, if we use standard deviation methodology, equal category, or natural breaks, etc., we don't have exactly the same representation. And in fact, it's a hard job to really have a look to this map, to extract what they can provide in terms of input. And in this kind of presentation, it's nice, it's fresh, we have a map, it's quick, but if we want to use it for policy purpose, we have really to take care about it and to use different, to have a methodology approach.
I have one request to Abhishek is that one of the point that he mentioned in branding part. So the most of these mobile or the electronic transfer platforms basically targeting to the like senders in terms of like if we look at the like remittance market. So as your organization like one of the like leader in India, so how basically like your strategies in targeting to the like the receivers part? So basically what is your strategies in place for the origin and the destination part? That is one. Second, if you allow, then I would like to like answer one of Sar's question basically relate to the like policy maker, how much this fundings on the research project in India, particularly in the India context, how it is like contributing in India. So I'll say, so the policy makers and the policy making process in India is not much of, practically it's not much of like depending on the like research inputs. So, so that is a kind of culture. So I'll say, so there are like a different culture where the policy making body is not much referred to the like research input. There is a gap between the like academic research group and the research group and the policymakers. I'll say recently there are like lot of initiatives from government side as well as from the research bodies are like taking place in minimizing that gaps. There are like number of research committees or the think tank within the government departments. Those are like closely working on the academia to take input. So these are the things happening, but based on that, how much policy making is happening, it's not clear much. But another thing is that positive is happening is that in India, the kind of research culture in the academia, if you see in the US, so most of the academic or the faculties, the professors here like engage in the research. So I think in India, that is mostly lacking. Most of the professors depend on the secondary data, government collected data, and do kind of like research. It's not basically the academia, they don't have even like any kind of incentive or the motivation to work on the research. That is not at all like coming under their like portfolio. So, but I'll say the kind of resource going on the on promoting the research work in India, that really certainly contribute in country developing the research activities and improving the kind of culture, research culture, as well as like the policymakers looking at the like researchers. So these are the things like happening, and I think the kind of investment is going from the universities or the funding agencies from America that is really contributing a lot in the paper. Thank you.
Well, there was a question for me. I don't think so I'm really supposed to take any questions. So I'm going to deflect it to Amrit. Amrit, what should be ECHO's strategy?
What's your strategy?
For recipients?
India has really insane anti-spam laws. I'm not sure how to answer that.
Well, just to quickly answer that question, the reason why we don't look at recipients is because on the sending side, the senders are in concentrated numbers. But on the receiving side, money goes all over the place. And it becomes very difficult to get the unit economics right for the agent. Mm-hmm. And so we are still far, far away from a critical mass which will allow for agent economics to be viable or attractive on the other side right now.
Bill asked me to introduce myself, so I'll do that. My name is Aladi Venkatesh. I'm a professor here in the business school. The reason I asked the question was I was a senior fellow of the American Institute of Indian Studies, spent 1 year in India. My host institution was the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. I believe it's called Madras, Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, even though it's Chennai. And I went through this particular kind of it's a 1 year stay and a wonderful stay both in Chennai and Delhi and so on. And I always felt that there is what is my contribution to the knowledge system? What is it that I'm doing? Who is benefiting from my presence there? I was very happy because I went to see my mother and my family. It was fantastic to be in Madras at that time. But more importantly, I think I also felt that the what kind of feedback can we give to people who are affected by our research? Although I published some amount, some papers from this, so it still keeps not troubling me, but something that I wanted to raise. How do we contribute to the policies or to the practicality, the worlds of practice and ideas and so on and so forth? So that was mostly a question to myself. So I just wanted to share with you my concerns. I think all the presentations are fantastic from yesterday to today, but something that I just wanted to reflect my own thinking and share with you some of my concerns, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Any other question? Yeah.
I actually had a comment on Professor Aladi, so if it's okay. So I just wanted to say that doing this kind of research, sort of a larger picture, for me it's always a struggle thinking. So what is the value of the work that you're doing? And often with sort of studying economy, it's just so complicated, and some of it is non-policy oriented work. And there's a certain amount of it that you feel that just creating this knowledge is valuable, and understanding the complexity is creating something positive somewhere. But then it's also an everyday struggle, like doing field work, because you know that having funding, having regular employment, speaking English, associating with certain institutions is giving you a certain amount of power, locating you in a certain place in a spectrum of global power, and I think that just awareness of that as well is something that is important to inform your work and struggle with. And I don't have a resolution for myself, but I feel that it's not so easy even to say that. I don't even know I know there are problems, but I don't know what the solutions are. But just, I don't know, acknowledging it somewhere that, yeah.
There's a question here.
Hi, I had a question about incentives for both the business correspondent models that I think Amrit, you may have studied, as well as Professor Lakshmi. First of all, I wanted to understand, Professor Lakshmi, were you looking at, remittance, like agents conducting remittance services? And if so, you did mention that they were working without incentives. They were providing these services, or at least the movie seemed to indicate that they were working without incentives. My question was, how would that be sustainable for them in the long run if there's no monetary incentives attached with the service that they were providing for the immigrants? And for Amrit, I think my question was, do you think remittance is the primary service that the mobile banking system is going to end up providing in India? Do you think that is like the major service that will end up being a part? Thank you.
The person who was remitting the money was the employer, who had about 7 or 10 or 15 drivers or construction workers working under him. So he was doing it as a service. So even upon questioning him again and again, he said there was no commission charged. Obviously, he would deduct it from the salary.
Can I be really candid about the answer? Personally, I think it's bleak for the next 3 or 4 years on how financial services in general will move on to cell phones, because policy has been, to use a US Marine terminology, a clusterfuck. So it'll take a while to undo a lot of that damage. And once that's done, once we start with somewhat of a clean slate, I think the progression with payments in India in general has been that you invest a lot of money, let this ecosystem mature, and then it's happened with debit cards and credit cards that it's kind of ubiquitous now. So it'll go very much the similar trajectory. I'll start sounding like a prophet here. But yeah, the trajectory will be very, very linear. First remittances, then eventually point of sale payments, and perhaps services built on top of it, say cash advances and loans as a linear progression.
Let me just add on to that. I think they just want the people to just get onto the remittance product, and once they get on into the remittance product, then I think after that everything else will follow. The customers or the clients. I don't know. I was in Hyderabad, and there was another agent called Money on Mobile, and they were also trying to get people to remit money. So the migrants. So through because they don't have bank accounts, because when you don't, I'm sure you know that if you don't have a permanent address, you can't have a bank account. So the only way out is through remittance. So once you get that on, then you can get everything else. Every other financial service can be provided one by one. So first is the remittance product. So either the employer gets you on or the agent, but get them on. So it's like a disease. I mean, not a disease, I would say. What?
It's a virus.
It's a virus, okay. So get them on to it, and once you remit, then you start remitting, and then every other service will follow. That's how I've understood it.
Thank you so much. We overshot by about 15 minutes plus. Thank you, Cyril, KV, Lakshmi, Amrit. Fabulous presentations, amazing work on the ground. Big round of applause for them. Thank you so much.